Bill Gates said most people overestimate what they can do in 1 year and underestimate what they can do in 10 years. When I first came across this quote, it kind of like sparked, a thought in my mind. Like, well, the thought had been there before, but the quote kind of like gave it more flesh. That a lot of times we are defeated even before we start a project, or before we start a course, or before we start a movement to create change. That's because the first thing that stares us in the face is it will take a long time for this to happen. So because of the length of time, we give up before we even start. However, you find that thinking in the long term actually helps you to begin to put problems in context. Problems lose their significance when you begin to think about them over the long term. If you study geography in school, there is a concept called soil formation, right? And it's the weathering of rocks over a period of time. On a normal day, using a hammer to try to break a rock would be a very tedious job. But leave a dripping water drop, like just water drops dripping, leave that for like 30 years, 40 years. Entire rocks can get converted into soil, into sand, into powder. That's because there was time on the side of that dripping water. So most people overestimate what they can do in 1 year, and by overestimation it means that they want to achieve everything immediately at once. And so the moment they find that they can't actually achieve all those things in 1 year, they get defeated. And so they keep starting things and not finishing them. But then they underestimate what you can do in 10 years. So the game is for those who can exercise patience, who are able to outlive and outwit the challenges they are trying to resolve, right? So that's it. So next slide. So this is Jadav Payeng. He is the forest man of India. When you were hearing the bio reading, it was mentioned that I studied agronomy, right? And even though, yesterday, Mr. Taiwo was saying those that they give agric, no, those that get into agric will normally tell you that they gave me agric. Well, that's what I also said when I came into Lauta. I said, Kai, they gave me agric because I wanted to study medicine. But, and agric back then seemed like the refuse dump of all the doctor wannabes, medical doctor wannabes, so or medical inclined career wannabes. So when you get to agric, you ask people, what did you choose? They say, hey, nursing. They say medicine. And then you're like, hi, so we find ourselves here now. But you see, agronomy actually is related to the oldest vocation in the world, which is agriculture or farming. That's like the oldest vocation. So you can draw timeless truths from agriculture. Virtually every timeless truth that determines the outcome of human life can actually be drawn from agriculture. And I'm going to try to draw some of that from the stories of these men. So this is Jadav Payeng, first man of India. Next slide. I read about him for the first time last year. So look at this picture very clearly. Do you see the barren land where he's planting a seedling, right? You can see a barren land, right? Now, next one. Now, that land became this. But then we're going to unpack how it became this. So the next one. So between before and after, the first picture you saw and the other picture you saw spanned 40 years. It took Jadav 40 years of planting trees every single day to be able to build out a forest in India. 40 years, he was 16 years old in 1979 when he started planting the trees, one after the other. And he planted a tree a day. And over the span of 40 years now, there is now 1,390 acres of forest, which is about 2,114 soccer stadium sizes. I mean, we're going to be hearing about sports very soon, right? Now, imagine that you put together 2,000 soccer stadiums, and that is all forest. That in itself alone actually changes the quality of life in that environment. The reason why the air in China was, before COVID. How many people saw the pictures of before and after? During COVID, before lockdown and after lockdown. For instance, in China, the air was filled with fog, which was because of the smoke from the exhaust pipes of cars and backup generators and all of that. But when everywhere was locked down for like 6 months, the sky became clear. In China, water bodies became clear as well. You could see the bed of the rivers in China. There were some other places in the world where fish that had been thought to have left that habitat, they came back after just a period of time because there was no more pollution in the air. Now, what is the natural sink for pollution in the world? What's the natural sink for pollution? It is trees. Because we exhale what? Carbon dioxide, and then trees what? They inhale carbon dioxide and give us oxygen. So basically, this man created a carbon sink of more than 2,000 acres. But it was not a day's job. It actually took him more than 40 years. Now there are 4 million trees, more than 4 million trees in that forest, and then there are more than 1,000 species, and wildlife has come back to that area in India. Next slide. So One Earth actually gave this, short excerpt. So Payeng started by planting bamboo and then moved on to other species. At first, planting trees was time-consuming until something happened. Can we all read this together? Can you see the screen? Good. So we're going to read that. We're going to read that entire sentence together. 1, 2, go. At first, planting trees was time-consuming until the trees started providing the seed themselves. That is how ecosystems are built. It starts with a few people choosing to plant a tree a day, choosing to invest in one person, at least one person, or 2 people, or 4, or 5. Right now, Ellis has about 60 students. Right now, that's 60 trees being planted, being nourished, being nurtured, that very soon will start producing their own seeds. And you wouldn't need to go look for them to multiply them anymore. Their multiplication just continues non-stop. So, how many students of SPI I have right now?
About 4,000.
About 4,000 students across all the campuses. That's 4,000 trees. And so we can look at different leadership, right, in this community, and then consider the number of lives they've invested in. Now, when they were investing in those lives, there was no channels, TV, camera following you everywhere, was there? No, you were not doing it because of the applause of people. You were not doing it because CNN was going to carry you. You were basically doing it because you were moved and convinced that that was how you find purpose and fulfill purpose, right? So Jadav Payeng is not a Bill Gates. He is not an Elon Musk. But for the people whose lives have changed because of his sacrifice, he is actually a person that they would never hold with levity. Are we getting the picture? He has changed lives, he has transformed lives. Interestingly, at the age of 16, he had the chance to move out of that area because he worked with a group for a while, planting trees, and then they left after the money for that project was finished. So the people that employed him, when the money got finished, they left. But he felt, I can't leave. Like there is something to still keep on doing. So that's the story of Jadav Payeng. So next. And then there is Sebastian Ribeiro, Amelia, Luis Salgado. This man was a photographer, and he happened to be a photographer during the Rwandan genocide. So in 1994, for some years, so he was taking these pictures that scarred him. Like I was at the genocide memorial in May or so, and the things I saw there, they're able to break. You can say you're a hard person, but if you actually see the exhibition, the story, listen to those things, You won't know when tears will begin to gush down your face because it was terrible. Now imagine someone who was there taking the pictures of act bodies that had been beheaded and all kinds of things. So when he went back to Brazil, he was scarred. He needed something that could give his life new meaning, that could help him, that could help him erase the memories of the tragedy he had witnessed. Next slide. So here was this valley in Brazil that initially was teeming with wildlife, that was actually having a whole lot of vegetation around it. But over time, deforestation had denuded the land. So the land was bare, things were bad in that locality. And then, that was in 2001. It's like, isn't this beautiful? Isn't it beautiful? Now, what was the time commitment that brought about this transformation? Let's say 20 years. It took 20 years of consistent, every single day of planting and nurturing the plants. It took 20 years of not being sure that the efforts will actually be appreciated, of not being sure that the efforts will actually pay off. It took 20 years of consistently reminding himself or themselves, his wife and himself, of constantly reminding themselves of why they started in the first place. And 2.7 million trees were planted. That's staggering. 2.7 million trees in the space of 20 years. About 1,500 acres of greenery. And 293 plant species, 172 bird species, and 33 animal species. In fact, some of the species that came back into that forest were assumed to have gone extinct. Some of them were assumed to have gone extinct. And then they came back because somebody was able to revitalize that ecosystem. Can we go back to the previous, yes. Thank you. Places are transformed because people commit to them. I was in Port Harcourt recently and I told them, I said, people make places. It is not places that make people. It is because some people chose to move from England to the new land, or what we call America. It was because some people chose to move from England to America that America became what it was. America was also barren, howling wilderness. It was terrible for the first set of settlers in America because the wild, the environment, the terrain was unforgiving. The winters were terrible. But these people kept laboring on the land. And then the land started shaping up. The land started yielding. And then they came up with the Declaration of Independence. And then the next day, that declaration also was followed up by having the Statue of Liberty in New York that welcomed everyone to the United States of America, telling them that if you have been stifled where you were, if you were not given opportunities to thrive, welcome to America where everyone is given equal opportunity. So the reason why we want to travel to America today is because some people gave their lives, gave their time, gave their intellect, gave their hearts to nurturing that country till it became a bastion of free enterprise in the world and also of democracy. And that is the exact same thing that leadership anchored to place makes up. So Ogbomosho for me and for my co-conveners is a project that we are not in a hurry about. We have time. Right? On a normal day, people say there is no time. But this one, we have the time. We have all the time in the world. Year after year after year, we will keep giving and giving and giving. And then there will be an explosion. So there will be an explosion that cannot be stemmed, that cannot be stopped. Remember Jadav's story? He planted trees until a time came. He didn't need to plant trees as much as before because the trees they are planted were already what? They were producing seeds that could reproduce after their kind. So the next thing we begin to have multiples of us. Multiples of us. And as we have multiples, what it does is that it allows us to move towards strategic things. And as we conquer those other levels, we are able to move on. and then we keep moving. So when we say that automation will become a template for African cities, European cities, Asian cities, North American cities, and South American cities, we are not bluffing. So final slide. This quote by Margaret Mead has been a very strong one for us at Ecological. And I'd like us to read this together if you can see it. Want to know? Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed people can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever is. Thank you.